like when the red light. Right? It's a police song.
Yeah.
Right. By the police. What's it called? Roxanne, you don't have to put out the red light.
Holy shit.
Roxanne, you don't have to put out the red light. Roxanne, put out the red light. Actually, you know what would be fun to just do a full concert series to begin every episode.
Incredible.
Anyways,
Welcome to today's episode where we are going to be discussing what is under the umbrella of cryptocurrency, specifically altcoins.
Altcoin nation, altcoin versus Bitcoin. Bitcoin versus altcoin.
Bitcoin?
In the left corner, we have Bitcoin, and in the right, in the right, we have Bitcoin, and in the left, altcoins.
Altcoins. We're diving in. So I picked today's topic.
Yeah, you did.
Because I thought it was a nice follow-up after we went into how to buy Bitcoin. When you went on there, you probably saw other coins.
I feel like if anyone actually made it through all 4 of the first episodes, like I'd black out from the amount of content.
My stomach hurts when I think back to episode 3 and how long and dense it was.
I loved that episode.
You thrived.
I love talking about this so much.
You thrived.
To our 8 listeners on the other side. It's so fun. I'm having fun.
Me too. Okay, so like always, our goal is to line up what you're going to get from this episode. This one, we're going to keep fairly light and simple.
We say that every time. Who
You're
knows
right.
what's going to happen?
Screw it.
Yeah.
Here's what you're going to get. So, 1, Bitcoin is fundamentally different from altcoins. Yes or no? Spoiler alert. Yes. 2, how altcoins are different from Bitcoin. Also, spoiler alert. They're very different.
Very different.
3, we're going to leave off on a bit of a philosophical note, but it's a big topic of discussing really what is money, and we don't want to get lost down that rabbit hole, so we're gonna leave that to the end.
And to that third topic, meaning it has significant relevance in this Bitcoin versus altcoin conversation.
Indeed.
Yes. Prior to
Indeed
getting
it
into the
does.
3, maybe we should start on like where altcoins, even like the phrase, comes from.
Yeah.
In general.
My best guess is that if it's not Bitcoin, it's an altcoin.
I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Yeah. I think it's important to note that you have heard of cryptocurrency. Under crypto, call that the big bucket. Inside the big bucket are 2 smaller buckets. There's Bitcoin and everything else. Everything else you can kind of call altcoins, but really it's short for alternative coin.
Yes.
I think that includes things maybe you've heard about of meme coins, alternative coins.
Tokens, probably to some
Tokens
extent.
probably in there.
Yeah, there's a little bit of semantics in there.
But
yeah.
I think a nice metaphor, analogy, simile, honestly don't know the difference. I mean, I do, like or as. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If you say you invest in crypto, you can compare that to saying I invest in stocks or the stock market. But all stocks are not created equal. There are different types of stocks.
Fair.
There are also different types of coins that are also not all created equal. And that's where we're going to go in today because it is crucial you understand the difference between the two.
Yes. And if you are listening and you were maybe looking for an example of where this would be relevant to your particular day-to-day, in previous episodes, we've talked about how to buy Bitcoin, or at least, rough ideas on what you might consider before buying Bitcoin. So put yourself in front of a computer or in front of a phone and imagine you went to a major exchange, Coinbase.com, something like that. Upon entering, you would see like a big old table, a bunch of rows and columns of different coins, different things that you could potentially invest in. And of course, you're going to see things like Bitcoin, like that nomenclature at the top, and you're going to see, the ticker symbol BTC. You're going to see the current price for the coin. You're going to see like these little green and red arrows about how the price has moved over a period of time. But then again, you see like this huge list of other coins. And back in 2009, when kind of Bitcoin got off the ground, there weren't any others at that point in time. And we'll kind of get into at least our thoughts on where we all think it came from. But over a period of time, whether different individuals or different companies, different entities, all kind of, cock their head to the left and they're like, hey, maybe we could build a coin. And, for better or worse, a lot of those are now available. They're publicly traded to some extent on these marketplaces. So
I imagine too, back in the day when Bitcoin was just starting and everyone was new to it, I'm sure really smart people, engineers and things like that, looked at it and probably thought, I can improve on this.
Yes.
Which could be another origin story to alternative coins.
I think I like that point of view because trying to remain objective.
That was why I said it.
It's us like trying to imagine positive intent because spoiler
before
alert,
we go on a tear,
we're gonna shit all over altcoins. but I agree there, right? We're gonna say there was an engineer. Engineer Dan. I've been using it like Miner Bob was one of them. Engineer Dan
or Miner Barbara.
Picture an individual back in the early days of Bitcoin.
Let's call him Dave.
Perfect. Engineer Dave is looking at Bitcoin, understands that this is a digital form of money, is looking at the mechanics of the Bitcoin protocol, looking at things like block issuance and how many Bitcoin there will ever be, things like that, looking at mining principles, looking at things like what level of cryptography or types of cryptography, SHA-256 being used.
Security, yeah.
And so then maybe this engineer is like, you know what? I think I can do this better, right? For whatever reason, they get that idea. And so whether they build a new coin on their own or maybe they, copy the Bitcoin protocol and make some improvements on their side. And then they go, voila, I've created Dragon Coin or whatever, insert coin name, right? And in, the early days trying to develop some market traction. But I like thinking of it in a positive intent, like they wanted to somehow improve.
And then it got dark and twisty.
Got a little dark and twisty. But I think as part of this first chapter, the reason we're even trying to somewhat normalize this topic of altcoins is really in pop culture, in public culture today. These altcoins or meme coins, shit coins, quite literally, sometimes as they're called, like they have a pretty big presence. And so I would be really surprised if for someone new to Bitcoin or new to crypto wasn't at least curious or maybe even potentially distracted by some of these things. So I feel like that's kind of where it's like there is a gravity to this. We wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't relevant. And there are some things you got to be aware of because you can get yourself into some hot water with altcoins. But I think Chapter 1, open and closed, Bitcoin is fundamentally different from altcoins.
Bingo.
What did you say was the second thing we're going to go into?
Wait, I had a thought. You were saying things. Oh, the other reason why I wanted to discuss altcoins today.
Yes.
As a beginner, I think altcoins, you said the word distracted. I also think it kind of creates, a barrier of entry. I think if you're new and you're like, okay, there's Bitcoin, but then like, where do I begin? There's 20,000 options.
Sure.
I think that looks like a giant tsunami wave that you may not want to dive into the ocean right away.
Ooh.
Stay land bound. But I think if we can clear up, really it's more 2 buckets. And then if you want to dip your toe into the altcoin bucket, just have a certain hat on so you know where you're going into, or a certain pair of glasses so you can really see it. But that's...
I have to reopen chapter 1.
That's something.
For 2 reasons. One, we kind of went into the example of engineer Dan, like why someone might want to create an altcoin. Why might you, the listener, why would a person potentially consider an altcoin? That's fair, right? I got my Coinbase account, right? They're looking at all of these different options. Yeah. It's kind of like the first time if you did log into a brokerage fund and you're looking at different stocks, like wow, Apple and Tesla, I can invest in both, woohoo, right? So I think for better or worse, I think one of the ways that people start to think about investing in altcoins is for the newer ones out there, the ones that aren't as old and maybe aren't as polished yet, the price per coin tends to be on the lower side.
Uh-huh.
And even though, like, for example, with Bitcoin, where you don't have to purchase
It's
a
attractive.
Bitcoin, you can purchase to the 8th decimal place, right? I feel like there's just something about investing. There's something about having a whole thing. And especially when, oh my gosh, this coin is only a penny,
Yeah.
right? It creates this low barrier to entry
Right.
where you're like, well, awesome.
What's a
let me
penny?
throw in $50. Let me throw in $100, right? Because, well, hey, maybe again, per the current pop culture norms, maybe this coin soars up into the right and then it's worth $1,000. So there's this narrative that lives in the mind of buying low and selling high
Yeah,
that I think
there's a
people
thrill
kind of
there.
conflate with altcoins, which again, I think gives a natural curiosity to like why they might look at some of these things.
Makes total sense.
That was part 1. Part 2, which a lot of this we're going to reserve for the third part of like getting into the philosophy behind money side of things. Bitcoin being fundamentally different from altcoins. So not just our opinion, but it also, as of recent, happens to be the opinion of the United States government, which is kind of interesting. So a small aside, about 2 weeks ago, the president signed an executive order creating 2 things. Number 1, a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And number 2, I might get the wording wrong, a digital asset stockpile,
I think that's right.
which is basically altcoins. So we can get into that in a different episode, but pretty kind of major moment for this world of Bitcoin to literally now have federal documentation kind of earmarking this thing as a strategic reserve asset, which is just kind of crazy. So they're equally thinking about them in 2 different buckets.
Yeah. I mean, this is really high level. Go read about it. But
Yeah.
the strategic Bitcoin reserve, I believe, is Bitcoin only. And they are
Correct.
looking to, over time, there's a way more to this, add to that reserve.
Yes.
The other one, the digital asset stockpile, per my light reading, is a collection of the digital assets that already exist in the government, in different corners of the government, through forfeits and seizures. So basically, it's a way to get organized on what is existing already, but they will not be, per what I understand, the declaration is that they will not be buying more altcoins. So Bitcoin, there's a plan of accumulating.
Yes.
The altcoins is just like, let's gather and organize and either repurpose, sell off, all sorts of things. So I think that's important distinction in that the government was like, heck yes, over here. Let's just deal with this over here.
I like their creative branding on instead of calling it, right? So it's instead of strategic Bitcoin reserve and altcoin reserve, they're like, nah, we need something better, like digital asset stockpile. So basically it's like non-Bitcoin digital assets that we're
everything
going to
else.
throw into this
Similar
thing.
to the same bucket.
Yeah.
It's almost the same thing as cryptocurrency. You have the one bucket Bitcoin, the other bucket's everything else. They're kind of treating it the same way.
All right. So
Do you think that wraps up the intro?
I think so.
Okay.
Or at least chapter 1.
Great.
Number 2, how do altcoins differ from Bitcoin? I know you in particular, certain aspects of this you got, I don't want to say excited about, like heated about. You got heated about
This may be
one.
my first opinionated episode.
Bring it down. So from your understanding, why are these 2 things not created equal?
I'm trying to think what's the best one to start with. Should we just go down the list?
Yeah.
All right. This is the one. This is the bomb that dropped that you explained to me, and I just couldn't really believe that it was a thing. It's called pre-mine.
Pre-mine versus fair distribution. We're going to go back to 2009. And whether it was a person or a group of people, we're going to say for a moment it's person Satoshi hanging out in the basement, making this thing called Bitcoin, right? And there's this moment where on the computer screen, the Bitcoin protocol was about to launch, and all Satoshi needed to do was click the enter button, right? And this thing would start cranking. And what that means from a Bitcoin context is that mining would start. And if we think about what mining is from the previous episode, there's, your computer is connected to power source in your walls. Your computer's pulling energy out and you're paying for that energy, right? And it's going to do this sort of computation, these really hard, or a hard guessing problem, really. And then at the end of that 10-minute block, right, there's a mining reward. And at the time, Satoshi person or group was rewarded with the first block reward of 50 Bitcoin. Woohoo! So at that point, that was the first time ever that Bitcoin was issued into the world. And as we know from previous episodes, Bitcoin has a hard cap of 21 million Bitcoin. So there will never be more than 21 million. And that's kind of like equally what's still happening right now. We're kind of trying to get 21 million into the world. The last Bitcoin's not going to be mined till year 2130 or 40 or something like that. So it's still quite a ways away. But the big thing there in this Bitcoin example is two things. Number one, there's a fixed cap, so the denominator of the fraction of Bitcoin, the bottom of the division problem, is fixed at 21 million. And Satoshi, just like everybody else, started with 0. So there wasn't any special fancy part of the code that gave Satoshi a leg up with, let's say, I'm going to start out with actually like 1,000 Bitcoin in my pocket.
No
or
cheating.
$1 million. No cheating, right? It's fairly distributed across the ecosystem. So that was the Satoshi example of like, that's ultimately what fair distribution is, and that's what Bitcoin is.
Okay, so then a pre-mine, hang in there with me. A pre-mine is when a creator decides to make a coin and they feel like they owe it to themselves.
Yes.
A reward.
I did all this hard work.
And I'm going to take 1,000. We'll keep it at 1,000. I bet it's a lot more than that. But we'll keep it at 1,000 for the example. I'm going to keep 1,000 to myself over here that wouldn't be available on this free market of the coin.
And I'm going to increase your stockpile actually to 1 million.
1 million.
And this is why. So, okay, you did a lot of work. You created Dragon Coin, right? You deserve a little pat on the back, right? So before this thing goes off into the world, you're going to, as part of writing the overall protocol for Dragon Coin, you're going to write it in so that a particular wallet, a wallet that you control, already has 1 million Dragon Coins in it, right? So that way when you flick it on for the first time and whatever mining or however it's issued into the world kind of starts, you're sitting there with a stockpile, right? And gosh,
kind of cut in line.
Well, what do we all hope happens, right? As any coin creator would, you're like, come on, Dragon Coin, freaking take off, like, right? You want the market to get excited about it. You want people to start investing in it and to start growing that value up and to the right? That's there's multiple recent pop culture examples of this happening with more meme coins, but Trump coin, there was literally a Trump coin right before his election. There's another current like pop culture individual called Haktua Girl, I think is her name. She, I don't know, has like a soundbite. Now she's famous on the internet, but she started a coin and kind of had this moment occur. But from your vantage point, where does that start to become a problem?
Okay, so let's say I have my 1 million coin stockpile, Dragon Coin, off to the side, and I'm driving hype. My coin's catching fire.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's growing. And I'm just watching it going, I'm going to be so rich. I'm going to be so rich. It gets to a number that I feel like I'm going to cash in my chips.
Yes.
I take that 1 million coin count and I flood the market.
Yes.
I sell my 1 million coins at top dollar. But the effect is that all of a sudden there are 1 million coins diluting the market.
Yes.
Naturally, the coin price is going to spiral.
Tank in value.
It's going to tank, and the fire will go out.
The fire will go out. It will become a smolder.
And while you're walking away as the creator with your fancy 1 million coin sellout, the other investors are really left with nothing.
So let's talk about, again, anecdote example of how this would happen. So you're Haley. You're the owner of Dragon Coin or the engineer of Dragon Coin, right? So you're sitting there with the 1 million. And let's just, for easy math, let's say that over a period of time, Dragon Coin reaches $100 a coin. So you're like, hell yeah, baby. $100 a coin times 1 million. I have $100 million on paper. Like, right, you're excited. And so now you want to start unloading it.
Dollar bill.
Dollar bill, y'all. So what do? If it's $100 a coin, well, I really want to unload this stuff. I don't want to take a long time to do it. So what do? This is a buyer and seller marketplace. I don't have to sell my coin for $100. Why don't I sell my coin for $95.
Do you do that so people bite and they buy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are likely other people trying to also sell their Dragon coin, but they're trying to get top dollar. Right.
Right. And someone's like, hey, I can buy this bunch for $95.
What's the difference between 95 million and 100 million? Not really that big a deal, right? So I'm going to create an attractive price point for my Dragon coin. It also means that more people, again, because this Dragon coin is hyped right now, they're going to buy as many of my coins as possible. So I start unloading, right? Well, again, when that happens, both in terms of the amount of coins hitting, so again,
You've inflated it.
You've inflated the coin. But what else happens is that the other people who are holders of Dragon coin go, shit, like, right? Like
It's going down.
Maybe they didn't get lucky to buy in at $0, which is where you bought in at, but maybe they bought in at $1 or $2, right? And they were watching this thing and they go, oh gosh, it's happening. We got to fire sale this thing. I'll take my money and run. So it literally, just like a run on the banks, it starts to create this frenzy and sell-off, and you just start to watch the coin value go down over a period of time.
You can finish your thought. I have a question.
This is the danger of the pre-mine. And coming back to this topic of altcoins, with a simple Google search, and maybe we'll even do it before we leave this podcast, of which altcoins and which popular altcoins have a pre-mine, there are many with them. And so for those that might be, taking hard-earned dollars and thinking about playing in this sort of casino that is altcoins, it's something to be aware of, because there are people sitting there in greater control of tanking the value of the coin that you might be buying and hoping goes up and hoping, over a period of time increases in value. And that's not always your choice.
So I came in kind of hot and was like, oh, okay, so you're dumping all these coins on the market and the value is going to be driven down. But let's rewind, because I may have gotten ahead of myself.
Okay.
Why is it bad that I dump 1 million Dragon coins at the same time?
Okay, so without getting hung up on the details, I think in this concept of, pre-mine is bad, there are some, maybe some assumed things that are happening.
Yeah.
Number one is that in that pre-mine, you would have pre-mined enough coins to have massive influence on the coin itself and the overall value. So that's the first thing.
Okay.
So it's like, right, you got big weight to throw around.
Okay.
Right. So I'm making this up, in a pool of 1 million total coins that are currently in the market.
Yeah.
You don't have like 100 to throw in. You have another million. So
right.
Like 50% all of a sudden you could potentially be inflating in that way.
Got it.
The second reason is because, again, in that instance where you're bringing those coins in, it's not as easy as like, let me just do a sell order for 1 million coins at, instead of $100, 95. It doesn't really work like that.
Okay.
You basically just imagine a curve that starts to go down, where what would happen is you might unload 100,000 coins at $95, but then because everyone else around you is panicking and they're selling to at 95, the price comes down. So then you got to sell them to 100,000 at 90 and 85.
The sheer
and 80.
number at the lower price is going to cause the panic.
So kind of like starts bringing it down. So it's those two things. It's assuming that you have a pretty healthy chunk of change, or the literal number of coins to throw around, and then it's the overall value itself that tanks over a period of time.
Okay, so if I were going to zoom out, because this is this pissed me off, I'm just gonna straight up say it, and I think you kind of just nod to it. But if you were to zoom out of like why pre-mine's bad, this is the part that got my goat. Is I would argue that Bitcoin has a real altruistic nature to it, and I think I'm an altruistic person. It just gets my goat that someone is going to create a coin with the sole purpose of putting off to the side a giant amount of coins to wait till it gets to a point where they know they're going to make money because they're in control, and then sell it and then kind of screw everybody else who participated to get them there. I just didn't like that, because I feel like that's premeditated with a cut the line, rig the game kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And so I think the best analogy, and we're going to probably use this throughout, is a casino. You're playing against the house always wins. It's kind of the same thing of like, you're going in, you're going to gamble with this money. Chances are it's going to light on fire and you're not going to take it out of the casino. And they knew that.
I think I completely agree with what you said. And that's where, again, to make sure that those listening or those watching don't come back to like, again, the Bitcoin versus altcoin. And they're like, am I lighting my money on fire with Bitcoin? Again, our stance is along this particular vector of pre-mine. There was no pre-mine of Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair distribution across the board. That's not to say that there's not some whales out there sitting on a lot of coins, but at least in terms of like its infrastructure and how it was created, that was never the intent. And there are a lot of
intent. That's the main word. Yeah.
The coming back to even, I forget which episode it was now, but like the Fed, and we were talking about these things.
Mm-hmm.
What's so fascinating is we already have a system right now where an entity can flood the market and ultimately set the value in a way.
Yeah.
So that's the other question is you're kind of like scratching your head like, why would you invest in an altcoin? Again, other than to make a quick buck in the casino, that's possible.
If you want to like have a good time and,
I want to highlight some of the names. Again, if people are logging in on Coinbase or whatever exchange and they're seeing certain things, again, these are also... these are names that people will be familiar with from a pop culture perspective, like just to give people an example. XRP, classic one. A lot of people hear about. What percentage do you think is pre-mined of XRP?
I didn't cheat. I didn't look. I know what the other one. I know how much the other one is that you might bring up. I'm gonna go 60%.
100%. 100.
How?
So they are just controlling the issuance and the distribution. So they basically had them all. Like a picture of a casino with chips, and they're just like handing out chips on their own volition, the only way they want to. So that's I know, no, 100% pre-mined.
100%.
Yep.
That doesn't even make sense.
I know. Let's look through some other ones. Cardano. That's another one. You and I have never talked about this.
No.
Pre-mine amount of it's 25.9. So we'll call it 26 billion out of 35 billion. So. I'm sorry, 26 billion out of a total of 45 billion. 26 divided by 45, what is that? 26 divided by 45, roughly 57%. So that ain't small. I know. That's the thing with
Well, I saw Ethereum, I think, is 70%. That's the one that I feel like a lot of people have heard of. 72 million Ethereum is the pre-mine amount. And again, in terms of what this is offering, it's not giving me the total. Yeah.
Because Ethereum, that's a different one.
It is.
To talk through. But long story short, pre-mine is a huge aspect of many of even some like the major altcoins that are available on these things. Now, let's take our objective approach. Let's imagine
it feels
we
like
had
a ticking time bomb, but
right.
Yeah,
let's imagine we had those people I just named, XRP and Cardano, in the room.
Yeah.
How might they reasonably defend a pre-mine?
Love it.
Okay, so let's say we weren't talking.
I love a good how might they.
Let's say we weren't talking about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency.
Okay.
Let's say you and I were starting a company, Dragon software platform, right? We have a thing. Well, isn't it? I mean, again, I've been in startups and software my whole life, or at least my whole career. So it's very common for people with an idea to go to other people and be like, "We got this idea.
Yeah.
We haven't built it yet.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's going to be worth money, but will you give us money to go build it?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Can you give us seed funding? Can you give us a Series A, a Series B? Hundreds of thousands, tens of millions to go build this." And that's how software investing works. Or I'm sorry, right, you have these angel investors, you have venture capitalists, you have PE firms that they'll write checks for $10 million in the absence of a real company, in the absence
private
of
equity, by the way.
Thank you. In the absence of real revenue, in the absence of real traction, they'll totally take these gambles, right? So if I was a member of one of these companies, I might say, you know what? You're right, there is a pre-mine. We believe XYZ about the foothold and power of our coin. And in order to do that, in order to build this thing the way that we want to, in order to build the infrastructure and to market it and all those things, we needed to do a pre-mine so that basically like we'd have an asset that we could sell in the early days and use that money to fund the project. All right. Like, right, nodding the head. You're like, happens in startup land.
Yeah.
Like, why is it such a big deal? And again, to the individual that might be choosing to invest, you might be okay with that. You might be okay with whatever the thesis is of that particular coin, right? But I think like this is where a big asterisk comes in, and we'll get to this like what is money? this podcast is focused on Bitcoin, and at least our thought process right now is that of all of the available cryptocurrencies, like this has won. It has won the battle of which of them have at least the potential, if not proven, to be base layer money.
Yeah.
So if you're investing in other altcoins with the idea that no, they'll be it, right? They'll replace the dollar. They'll do something bigger. That's the part where you got to really look in the mirror and be like, I don't know. I don't know if that's the case anymore. That's not to say that there couldn't be, I don't know, maybe there are some altcoins out there with some sort of intrinsic utility that you and I are unaware of. And so again, you're comfortable with a pre-mine because you believe in the project and you believe that the project itself will have value in other ways over a period of time, and you're no big deal on the pre-mine. But that might be a way for someone to defend it. Still, in our camp, it's like a no. Like, no thank you. You can keep it. But that's at least the first part.
Well said.
Second part.
But I like that of comparing. If we're going to be objective, you're like, hey, we need some funds. But at the end of the day, that's their prerogative. It feels definitely different. It's like treating altcoins more like startups, where Bitcoin is more of a money revolution.
Yes.
Very different.
Second thing. What's the second thing?
Second thing, centralized versus decentralized, which I think ties in very nicely to what you just said.
How so?
As we've said many times, Bitcoin is a decentralized network. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah. Meaning no one person or one entity controls the network.
Correct.
Decisions are made by consensus. There is not one person in charge.
I liked what you said of control. So part of the benefit of Bitcoin and decentralization is that no one individual or no one superpower controls it, right? It requires, to your point, consensus.
A trustless system.
A trustless system. And that's by virtue of looking back at the monetary system for the last several hundred years and looking about why it's not working out. And it's because when you have power centralized with an entity that, in this case being, we're talking about the concept of money, and someone can print money, they always will. Like, there is like never ever been an example in time with like a centralized authority over a base layer money where it's like, it's totally gone fine. Like, right. Or at least, again, over a long period of time. Right. It's never happened.
Yeah.
So in the case where you were choosing to invest in an altcoin with its intent to either beat Bitcoin or be better than Bitcoin, that's like one of the first big things you got to think about is like, hold on a second. Like, is this artifact, is this coin centralized? And no surprise, many of them are, which would give then the control over that coin, the protocol, the code, the issuance, how many are out there, total control. So XRP, again, another one out there. I promise, XRP folks, I genuinely have nothing against you. It just ChatGPT does, because you're the one that keeps coming up. So XRP.
Yeah.
XRP is controlled by Ripple Labs, the company that created XRP.
Okay.
Ripple has significant influence over network validators or their nodes. So you're just like, already you got one company with a 100% pre-mine and they control the whole thing. I mean, by and large, it's kind of a direct replacement for the Fed, like, in a way, like, right, where you're like, what's the point? What's the point, at least comparatively to Bitcoin? And again, people could still be holding on to, no, I know it's going to be better than Bitcoin for these reasons, but it's that centralization aspect, in addition to the pre-mine, that sort of breaks the thesis on those. And we know that, again, from the previous episodes that we've done, is that it doesn't work. So
you really have to trust the people in charge.
Which you can't. We already know you can't. We know that. We know that you can't. It just doesn't work that way. So with that, centralized versus decentralized, who makes the rules? You just got to know you could get into a really, really tough spot with some of those things. Like, again, back to our Dragon Coin example. Are you going to be okay if for whatever reason the controller of your said altcoin decides to double the amount available? Like, you know what? There was going to be a time where there's going to be 20 million. Now I think there should be 40 million available, and just like cuts the overall value in half by virtue of there now being twice as many available. Like, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it could. So
Yeah.
Anyways, that's the second one. The third, which I think we've kind of touched on because it's more of it's a result of pre-mining and potential centralization, is this concept of a rug pull. So yeah, this is more of a bad result of those first two things. Do you want to give what rug pulling is a shot?
I feel like you should, because I'm actually confused. Rug pulls are a consequence of pre-mines.
Correct.
If the centralized party decides to do so.
Right. So again, I'll give an example, and then I'll pull this up on the phone here in a second.
Okay.
So pop culture right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not uncommon for personalities to launch altcoins, also known as meme coins, in this regard, because the coins themselves have no actual utility, right? It's literally just like a pop culture thing. Like, oh, like this person launched a coin. Sure, here's some bucks, right? I'll pull up two in particular, but Trump launched a coin right before election, Trump coin. And also Hawk Tua Girl, the other one I threw out there. That one, and I'll pull up the numbers because they're just pretty staggering. So in that case, these individuals had a bunch in the beginning. And of course, pop culture, the market hype drove a lot of interest and eyeballs to those. And so a lot of people started throwing dollars, kind of like skyrocketed.
Okay.
And of course, again, the people at the top, those with the large amount of coin, are like, sell, 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 which unfortunately means that all the people that bought in at the top, right, are starting to, because their coin's going down over a period of time. So let me just pull up two in particular, just because the numbers are kind of staggering.
So rug pull is the big sell-off that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know it's a little bit boring to read this, but I'm going to read this. So in December of 2024, so a couple months ago, Haley Welch, who knew? Widely known as the Hawk Tua Girl, following her viral TikTok video, launched a meme coin called Hawk, like a $ Hawk, HAWK.
Okay.
The token experienced a meteoric rise, reaching a market capitalization of approximately 490 million within minutes of its release.
Stop.
However, the surge was short-lived, as the token's value plummeted by
Hey.
over 90% shortly thereafter.
Oh my God.
Leading to allegations of a rug pull, a scenario where developers or insiders rapidly sell off their holdings, causing the token's price to crash and leaving investors with significant losses. Key factors leading to the crash. Number 1, centralized token ownership. Analysis revealed that 97% of the Hawk supply was initially held by just 10 wallets, leaving only 3% available for public trading. This centralization made the token highly susceptible to price manipulation. Number 2, pre-sale investor sell-offs. Out of the 285 pre-sale investors, 30% rapidly liquidated their entire holdings, while another 23% sold portions, collectively extracting an estimated $3 million. These actions flooded the market with tokens, triggering a sharp decline in price.
Okay.
Third, I have not heard of this, sniper bot exploitation.
I don't even know what that means.
Me either. We might cut this part because I don't know what it is, but despite efforts to deter automated trading bots, one account managed to acquire 17.5% of the total supply within seconds of the launch, later selling these tokens for a profit of approximately 1.3 million. So a 90% drawdown.
That's insane.
Millions. So anyways,
I think
beware.
this is the other reason why I got a little spiky on this rug pull pre-mine concept. It gives the whole thing such a bad rap. You know,
agree.
it's like you got a kid in your class that ruins the pizza party for everyone, and then you don't ever get pizza parties again. It's like,
Yeah.
man, who invited the kid who got the pizza party canceled? And I feel like altcoins are totally that kid.
They do, unfortunately, because again, they're so popular in the media. It's unfortunate to be linked to them. They are, by virtue of it being cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And again, these are all people that put their money into these. Like, it's their choice. Like at the end of the day, to do this, but maybe again they're choosing to do so in the absence of the knowledge of some of these things.
Yeah.
So,
And I think just to drive home our why is always to make this more approachable. I think understanding these two things, hopefully then you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll dip my toe in and learn.
Two others. So the next one, just again, in terms of how altcoins differ from Bitcoin, I would say age and history of the coin itself. So again, because Bitcoin
apparently
was
they
the
can
first,
last about 90 seconds. So, Bitcoin's got some years on the Hawk coin.
Well, it's the oldest.
I saw one that was called Bonk coin. So Dragon coin, maybe we just go by Dragon.
Do you think there is Dragon coin? Maybe it's out there.
I mean, ever since, what's it called, came out probably.
But the age and history of the coin. So on the one hand, you got Bitcoin, that's the oldest. And I think part of that is to say, if it was going to fail, wouldn't it have failed by now?
Right.
It's kind of like one of the, I don't know, points of view you could bring to the table. I think what that also means is that the fact that it hasn't is there's some resiliency built in. So that's the part that, I don't know, at least in terms of age speculation, that's like that one part. With a lot of altcoins, and again, with a simple Google search, you could literally just go in like, how long has this coin been around? Is it weeks? Is it months? Like maybe it's years, depending on that. But in the absence of real time in the market and proof that these things are resilient, it would just be another consideration. And while we can't speak to this for altcoins, at least with Bitcoin, what we do know is as new blocks are issued, meaning as time goes on and as new blocks are added, the blockchain itself, or the Bitcoin blockchain, becomes more secure. Go back to the previous episodes on why that is.
Confirmations, immutable, 6 confirmations.
But that's the other cool part, is the older it gets, the stronger it gets. And I don't want to say that other altcoins couldn't equally have aspects of that, but Bitcoin definitely does. Last one, which could be go ahead.
I know, the last one. Yeah.
Purpose and utility
yes
versus speculation.
I like this because I've read the word speculative asset many times. You've said that word, and honestly, I couldn't define it. So I looked it up.
Okay.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, a speculative asset exists with the hope that, or it exists only because there's a hope it will be more valuable, but there's really no actual utility or intrinsic value to it. So hope is not a strategy, but that's how they exist. They are because they are.
They are because the market is hoping they will be something at some point in time.
So weird.
Like these altcoins, right?
They're like
Hawk
invisible.
coin. They just exist because, right?
Someone said it. It's like art is art until someone says it's art. It's kind of the same.
It's because someone voted with their dollars, right? And then other people see those votes and they're like, well, I'll vote with my dollars, right? And they invest their dollars in. But it's all to your point with the hope that speculation will drive the value up and that I might get to benefit from that speculative asset valuation increasing, because then I could sell at a market high, right? And play with that. So that's why I think we keep referring to this altcoin world as a bit of a casino.
Yeah.
Because it is. It's speculation that's ultimately driving things up and down. And in the absence of real utility or perhaps functioning as money, that's all there is. So it's a huge gamble in those regards. And this is where we're going to get into the philosophical side here for a second of like, okay, but like, what if something has purpose and utility? I do want to talk about utility just for a second. We're not going to be able to get into it on this episode, but there are coins out there, or what we would call tokens out there, that exist with an intended utility. And as a result of that, they have some value. Again, the market ultimately tells us what that value is. In those cases, I would say those coins are kind of holding their hands in the air going, we're not trying to beat Bitcoin. We're not trying to be the base layer money. We're trying to serve a function. And it just so happens that by being a medium of exchange in a small way, that there's utility there. I want to give some examples of these. And again, I know it's a bummer because we're not going to be able to go into all of these. But let me think. Examples of utility tokens. This is an interesting one. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with it. There's a popular exchange out there called Binance. Big old exchange where you buy and sell cryptocurrencies, right? So they have a utility token or an
Okay.
altcoin called Binance Coin.
Okay.
Originally, it was a utility token for Binance Exchange discounts, now used for transaction fees, DeFi, and more. Basically, this was Binance saying, if you want to buy and sell stuff on our platform, or if you want to use our platform and pay the fees, we'll give you a price break if you use our coin to do so. So it was sort of a pay-to-play scenario where it's kind of like, it's like when you go to the arcade and you have to exchange your quarters for tokens, and you're like, I don't know why I have to use the tokens to play the game. Like, I had quarters, but like, right, there's kind of that bit. Let's see. Again, we're getting into tricky waters here. Chainlink, another one, required to access and pay for Oracle services that connect smart contracts with real-world data. There's this whole use case around quote-unquote smart contracts and how you connect it to real-world stuff, and you have to use their utility token in order to do it. So it's not a base layer money use case. It's a different use case entirely.
Yeah.
But like, right,
still sounds weird.
I know. It still sounds weird.
And unnecessary?
I would agree in many ways. I feel like we should stop at that point in time because we could easily confuse folks listening.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think, again, in this, as we now bridge into this third bit, you just have to ask yourself, and again, it's on you if you want to make that call. Am I investing in this speculative asset, which is purely driven on market hype? It has no real other utility. And again, you might be cool with that because it's just like playing blackjack. Maybe you win, maybe the value goes up, and you get to participate in those games. Buy the lottery ticket. Or is there actual utility or a use case for this, which gives me greater confidence in this is why I'm putting, investing into something in this case. And again, at least our thesis is Bitcoin would be the place to do that. But I do want to talk about this because this is where, as we were like thinking the chapters, right? Number one, we're going to tell you Bitcoin is fundamentally different than altcoins. Number two, why that is. Like, here's some things to consider with that. But then number three, and this is like the unavoidable topic, is that it's because Bitcoin's utility is so massive. It acts not only as a base layer money, it acts as a store of value. Like, there's real purpose for humanity in this thing.
Sound money.
So I will do my best to recall this or to recant this conversation. But I just think it's relevant for it. So we're headed to Lowe's. This is like a couple weeks ago. And we're in the car. And we're talking about altcoins because like you were thinking about them. Yeah. And I could tell the main question I think you were struggling with is you were kind of like, holy moly, like what is the difference between Bitcoin and altcoins, where you're kind of like, aren't they just the same? Like, right? It's like there was this thing that was created. And I think you were almost even like kind of for the moment, like in service of the altcoins, like why couldn't they have a shot? Like, isn't it possible? Right. And so we really struggled for like 20, 30 minutes to like find the unlock to it. Yeah. And this is where I know we're even still working on this because it is trying to wrap your arms around the concept, the philosophy, the mechanics of money is just so big. Yeah. And there's so many ways that you could deviate from this and like be like, but we need to unpack this. Like what gives something value? Like that's a very like almost religious conversation in a way. Yeah. But I feel like here's where we landed. So after like a couple of attempts, it was like, all right, we have to almost like table the Bitcoin versus altcoin conversation for a second and first align on a metric or a belief that we're both like in on 100%. Yeah. And there was nothing challenging it. And I think where we started was like our house. Yeah. Real estate. We both agreed that our house or real estate in general has value. Yep. It also has utility because we can live in it. Yep. Right. And it has value because you and I know like the market says it has value. Yeah. Like, type in your address and you see this little thing called a Zestimate. Yeah. Right. And how is the market valuing it? It's like, well, it's looking at the prices of other homes and what they've sold per square foot. And it's saying, well, this is what the market is willing to pay. And so that's how much your house is worth. Yeah. And there's not one iota of us that would try and fight that notion. We agree in the utility of the home. Yep. As we live there, and we agree in the value of the home because the market says so. And we're sitting, I think we had finished our Lowe's purchase. Yes. We were like sitting, we were like driving home. Yeah, it was after. So in that, and this is where it percolated amongst the sink and plumbing and lighting aisles. My silly sink project. But what it did is I think we're sitting there going, or what I tried to do is say, okay, so if we both agree on that, let's start on the market side. Because again, a lot of you all listening, even if you're not a homeowner, I guarantee you know what a Zestimate is because you're looking at these home values. So in doing so, the first thing that we aligned on is the market gives value to things. The market ultimately is the driving force of what is valuable and what's not valuable. Just like companies can rise and fall, it's the market that determines that. Case in point, Blockbuster versus Netflix. Oh my God, how great was it going to Blockbuster Video when we were kids? At the time, incredible. Then this little company called Netflix comes along, and the market says, sorry, Blockbuster, we no longer need to buy your videos, and so like overall value of Blockbuster goes down, company goes bye-bye, meteoric rise of this new company called Netflix, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing is then taking that concept of the market and the market valuing something and then go, great, how does that apply to Bitcoin? And we're sitting in the car and I'm going, the total market cap of all the money and value in the world, right, is 900 trillion, roughly 900 with a T.
Big number.
Big old thing. And we were looking this up before. The market cap, global market cap of gold is 16 trillion with a T. And you and I both agree, gold, we wouldn't fight that. Totally an asset. We would agree has value. You can buy gold bars at Costco now. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, gracious, one of those things, excuse me. And so sitting here today, roughly March 2025, the market cap of Bitcoin is $2 trillion. Trillion with a T. It's such a big number. And I know it's easy to throw these millions, billions, trillions out.
You get used to just the big numbers, but that's like, how many billions is that again?
It's so big. So, and this is where,
billions?
back to like why this was it's such a hard conversation because there's so much philosophy. And I am not an economist in this, but all I do know is that 2 trillion is a pretty big number. The market has decided that this thing is worth 2 trillion. I don't know where the threshold was.
Yeah.
There was a time when Bitcoin was only worth a market cap of $1 million. There was a time where it was worth $1 billion. And so like my rough, I think like attitude was like somewhere between $1 billion and $1 trillion. The market ultimately was like a check. Like this thing has value.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. And I feel like that was the first part where we're sitting in the car and you're like, got it.
I started to get it.
That was the first part.
Yeah.
But you had a really good retort though, is you came back and you're like, yeah, but Taylor, like the house, we live in the house.
Yeah.
It has utility.
Yes.
Right. So you're like, yeah, there's this estimate. Right. But we also like these estimates can go up and down. Market can go up and down. Right. Blockbuster can disappear. What about the utility?
Yeah.
And that's where, again, it gets into this, what is money? And where of all those altcoins out there, right? Right now, is there a likelihood that you and I could find someone of our relative age group and say, hey, we'd love to buy a car from you or buy, I don't know, buy whatever.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, would you take Bitcoin for that? And the likelihood is like, could you and I find someone willing to trade Bitcoin for that?
I think so, yes.
Unequivocally, yes. There are nations that you walk into a Starbucks, you walk into a McDonald's, you can pay in Bitcoin if you want to.
Yeah.
So it's not even a question of, is Bitcoin money? It is.
It is.
It's proven itself. So like in terms of the utility aspect, that's where it starts to come in. And while, yes, like, don't get me wrong, I know we're sitting here in California and, you know, you and I can't walk into, I don't know, Albertsons down the road and like buy something with Bitcoin yet, but it's proven itself already in that capacity. And so it's in those two measures, both in terms of how the market has valued this thing at a $2 trillion with a T valuation, and the fact that it has proven itself as a money, maybe not yet a base layer money, but boy, oh boy, is it approaching that. I think those are the things where it was like, and that's why the altcoins will not win.
Yeah. Finding someone to use Bonk coin to buy a car might be a bit far-fetched than Bitcoin.
I'm going to look second highest market cap crypto currency.
Oh, what's the one following? What's in second place?
Okay. So
bring it.
Again, I'm not trying to say these numbers are low, but just as for context. Okay. Bitcoin, 2 trillion with a T. As of March 19th, 2025, Ethereum.
Okay.
Which for the crypto folks out there, I actually, if we had to classify it correctly, even within altcoins, actually, I think we'd call it a utility token. That's what people would call it. Has the position of the second largest cryptocurrency by market capitalization. Ethereum's market cap is approximately 244 billion with a B. Okay, still pretty big
than I thought.
Okay, 244 billion with a trading price of around $2,000 per Ethereum. Okay, so hold on. So 244 billion and 2,000 per ETH. Okay, so right, higher than you thought it would be. I'm not saying that 200 billion is small or 240 billion is small.
No.
But in terms of just the vast difference in comparison, I like this like time comparison of counting money. If you counted $1 per second, 200 billion would take you 6,342 years to count.
Okay.
If you counted 2 trillion, it's add a zero, 63,420 years. Like it's a 10x, right? It's a 10x difference. In our opinion, or I guess I know definitely in mine. There just isn't a world where this changes, where both from a market cap perspective and from a utility perspective, that anything else wins. And I welcome the commentary. If you think I'm incorrect in that, I'd be delighted to engage. But that's where I think that we're at between Bitcoin and altcoins.
Love it. I agree. I think it's so I think going into this episode, in full disclosure, this is the second time we've recorded this one. And I'm saying that because I picked this episode because it kind of just blew my mind that there are so many options and I did not realize the vast difference between Bitcoin and altcoins. I picked this episode because I thought it was important, like a PSA of like, hey, just like every time we get on this, disclosure, we are not financial professionals. Do your own research.
Yes.
If you want to go play at the casino,
yes,
do it. Know it's a casino. Know that different players have different incentives. And it's not a game of investing in sound money. It's kind of like, you're going to go, I don't know how.
I love what, oh, no. You just said something really genius right there.
Okay.
You just said investing in the casino, aka altcoins, is not investing in sound money. Full stop. Like that right there. The difference between these things is Bitcoin is sound money. Altcoins are whatever else they might be.
Yeah.
Like that is the vast, stark difference. And again, even to a listener who might be like, I don't know, I'm making this up. I even have I have friends who'd be like, yeah, but Tay, like I could, screw around with $1,000 in the altcoin market and who knows, I could make $10,000 like right there. And you absolutely could. But what that does too is it puts you in a different mindset of, for those I feel like that are approaching Bitcoin and maybe understanding a bit more, the time preference associated with this is more of a long game.
Yeah.
This is not a throw $1,000 in and then 5 days later sell it, right? That's not what this is about. Because again, once you see these problems with money, once you see kind of what this tries to do, this is like a long haul.
Yeah.
Whereas there are people from a short-term perspective, they're like, I don't know, I want to play around and I want to see this thing go up and down on a daily basis. And that's where
the arcade,
altcoin arcade, awesome.
Ooh,
like
altcoin arcade. I like that.
So it's preference. Long time horizon, long-term time preference versus short-term time preference. There's a utility for both. Do your homework, basically, at the end of the day.
Yeah. I don't have much else to say. What I was saying of like, we did, full disclosure, we did record this before I kind of got off topic. It's difficult. This is difficult. So if you get inspired and you're like, hey mom, or dad, or brother or sister, friend, altcoins and Bitcoin aren't the same. It's hard to regurgitate back to I hate that word. Anyway.
I know how we're going to end. Oh my gosh, I know how we're going to end.
But don't feel discouraged if you get excited and then you try and go tell someone and it doesn't come out the way you planned. This is my second attempt and halfway through my brain just went, wah, and yeah.
I know how we're going to end. And it's funny because I don't
fake it.
I don't know how we would have discussed this before.
Okay.
But and we'll keep the anecdote short. But the anecdote would be, learn from our pain.
Oh, you're
Okay.
going to do it.
So and genuinely, this is why it's like,
Do
I
it.
feel like this is why to maybe, I don't know, for you, I know you were really gung ho, like why this is such an important like little mini episode.
Yeah.
My own entrance into the space of cryptocurrency was
Yeah.
through altcoins.
Yeah.
It wasn't through Bitcoin.
No.
And that's where, again, for those that are interested, like do your research.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you,
You did your research.
I had found a particular altcoin. Like literally, the thesis I went in with is I kind of started to understand that there were some problems with money just in general, the money supply.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around, and I obviously knew about Bitcoin. I hadn't gone as in depth as I should have in the early days with it, but I had enough of an understanding to where it's like, okay, like let's look at everything else.
Yeah.
And in my, I'll say like technology forward self, I was like, come on, there has to be someone that's looked at the base layer of Bitcoin, they've looked at the protocol, they found flaws, and they think they've found ways to improve upon it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I had found a project that was authentically better for a number of reasons. And I still remember like that feeling and like and justifying it with myself of like, well, this is why not Bitcoin and why this thing. And what I genuinely love, and what I say like again, learn from our pain, is I have a good buddy whose phrase is learning hurts. And this is like one of those
I thought
moments.
that was your phrase.
No, it's not. That's a good buddy of mine.
Okay.
And that's the part where some of the best lessons are some of the more painful ones. And we're so thankful this was not like playing with big dollars. This is like, again, altcoin casino. You're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Here's like, I don't know, $500. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating to get to experience like whether or not that was correct, and like, oh, like take a look at centralized versus decentralized. Take a look at what is the market saying.
I was just gonna say, it's
What
like,
is the market saying?
We fought the herd.
I think that was in particular
That was our biggest lesson. I think
the respect for the market and how big a driver it is, how big a driving force it is. It's sort of like why economics are such a big thing, and why it's also like it's such a big thing to try and control. Like it kind of even hilarious to think that an entity like the Fed, 12 people on the board of the Fed, could ever truly try and quote unquote tame this beast. Like it's so big. There are so many moving parts. The transfer of money and value and the interoperability of different asset classes. It's just bananas. It's so big, and it's the fuel to our world and to productivity. And so I loved being humbled by it, and it was totally one of those things. It was like, well, learn the lesson, and then in doing so, that like shined a big bright ass light on Bitcoin, and it's been really fascinating ever since. But there we go. Learn from our pain, or learn from Taylor's pain.
I'm always supportive. I was like, yes, well, that sounds great. It's super fast. That's awesome. Well,
That was it.
altcoins. I hope you know that. Honestly, just know that they're different. That was my main goal. They're different.
But I'll say,
Don't conflate the two.
From my seat, Bitcoin's better.
Our podcast is called Two Hearts, One Bitcoin for a reason. We're not Two Hearts, One Altcoin, or Two Hearts, 20,000 altcoins.
And unless, I mean, again, we're still only very few episodes in. I got to be honest, too. The other part with this, like, I am so disinterested in anything other than Bitcoin. Like, I have no interest in even wasting breath on it. Like, that's where
this
it's
feels like an orphan block.
Yeah, but I feel like it's like I don't know if we're going to talk about altcoins again or Ethereum or other things.
No.
Like, nah, it's just I'm not interested in that at all. It's kind of like once the I don't know, the combustion engine came around, it's like no one's really talking about like horse and buggies anymore.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, but like the wheels are so much cooler on this buggy. You're like, no, it's just not interesting. So
Yeah, but I do think it was important to make
I
sure
agree.
people knew it was different because I did not know.
Yeah.
So
Well, hey,
cool.
now they do.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for listening, and until next time, thanks for listening to Two Hearts, One Bitcoin.
See ya. Bye.